I said I was most likely going to do this next video on a different topic, but it turns out that the less likely scenario happened. I am creating a part 2 on the storytelling axiom, and the reason for that is because I had a couple people ask me some really good questions, which I thought would be great to address in front of the whole audience, because they do allow for a further dig into understanding this topic, or maybe not understanding it, since it's so zen and so kind of insane and has this no mind or not knowing quality to it, right? But, for lack of a better term, it allows for this deeper understanding of the subject. So let's start off with basically like an example of the type of question that was posed to me by a couple of the people who watched part 1. And that was, as I was going about describing how you can have all these weird contradictions and paradoxes that defy direct experience to such an extent that it's literally true to say that this skin looks green to you right now, even though it obviously doesn't, right? Like saying that it's true that this skin looks green, that obviously defies your direct experience, right? Your direct experience is that it looks white or tan or apricot to you, right? Whatever you want the color to be called, it looks that color to you. It does not look green. So how could there be something that is true that also defies your direct experience, to say that it looks green to you even though it does not look green to you? And that's just the very nonsensical nature of the storytelling axiom, is that, if reality worked in that way, right? If reality were reflective of my condition like that in any way, then yeah, you would have these, as I called them, blatantly false truths. If you remember that contradictory term that I coined in the last video, you would have these blatantly false truths, meaning statements that are true, yet they're blatantly false because they blatantly defy even your very direct experience. So if reality were like this in any way, that would mean that it's possible for reality to get underneath even direct experience, right? We consider direct experience to be primary, like the primary color red, and yet what we're saying is no, reality could get underneath that primary color and find colors that are even more primary than red. Like you could combine them together and get pure 100% red, as if red isn't a primary color, right? So it's the same thing with direct experience. We regard direct experience as primary because it's so direct, yet if reality is absolutely infinite, like what I experience, could just be a mental condition. But if reality is really like that, and this storytelling axiom that I talk about is real, then you would have things that are more primary than direct experience, such that they literally defy it. This skin is green to you even though it's not, stuff like that. I also used the other example in the last video, though, about how that means even though you're experiencing yourself as a human being in this life, it would still be true to, again, make a statement that defies even that directly experienced truth, such that it's also true to say that you're a pig. That's why in the thumbnail I have the mermaid up there, right? Like, okay, it's somehow true to say that you're experiencing your life as a mermaid even though you're obviously not, or a pig even though you're obviously not. But the question that was posed to me by a couple people after that video, which is a really good question to go over, is what is this quote-unquote you that we're saying is a human or is a pig, right? We're saying you're a human, yet you're a pig too, even though that defies your direct experience. Okay, but what is this you that is a human or is a pig or is a mermaid, etc.? Okay, well, this is a good question, but ironically, it does not take the storytelling axiom far enough down the rabbit hole. You basically need to realize just how insane the storytelling axiom is, because if a human can be a pig even though they're not, then we could say the same sorts of contradictory things of the self, or quote-unquote you, right? So, Buddhists would say there is no self. So if we ask, what is this you, that is a human or a pig, a Buddhist would just say, well, it's nothing, right? There is no you, there is no self. Okay, well, the storytelling axiom is so utterly insane that it allows us to carve underneath even that Buddhist mantra of no self. Because we could say, okay, what is this you that is a human or a pig? Well, it could be anything. It could be a real self. There could be a real self, unlike what Buddhists say, or it could be a non-self, right? The Buddhist doctrine of no self could be true. And even if either one of those is just strictly 100% true, the other one could still, in a contradictory manner, also be true. Because again, it's just 100% false that this skin looks green to you, and yet the storytelling axiom could even make that 100% false statement into something that is genuinely true. You see that? So we got to carry that same insight or insanity over to the notion of the self, right? So what is the self? What is this you that we're speaking of? Well, it could be real, right? It could be a real self, or it could not be real. There could be no such thing as a self, or it could be both real and not real. It could be neither real nor not real, or it could just be one. It could just be that one of those examples that I've just listed is 100% correct, and yet at the same time is false, right? Like it's 100% correct that this skin looks apricot to you, yet somehow that still manages to be false, even though it's 100% correct. That's just the contradictory nature of the storytelling axiom. Again, it allows for those blatantly false truths. So even if something is 100% false, the storytelling axiom could, in a contradictory manner, make it true. So what is this you that is the pig or the human? Well, I don't know. It could be a blade of grass. It could just be a human. It could just be a pig. It could be a real self. It could be no self. It could be both a self or no self. It could be neither a self nor no self. It could be the color green itself. I mean, like you can literally just say anything with the storytelling axiom. It's literal insanity. You can literally just posit any answer. And even saying that you can posit any answer, that entire sentence can be unwritten by the storytelling axiom such that it's not true to say that we can just posit any answer. The storytelling axiom could make it such that it's actually only one statement that exists, which is true, right? Maybe it's just only true to say that there is no self, and that's it. There is no such scenario in which there's a self or both or neither. It's just that one exclusive thing. That statement alone, right, is true. It's like a standalone truth that defeats all the others. Or it could be a combination. It could be that there's one standalone truth, and yet in a contradictory manner, all the other ones are also true, even though this one is standalone. Like, do you kind of see how we're literally like just being as irrational as possible right now? Like we're just completely throwing rationality and thinking out the window. We're stupefying ourselves. We're not even talking about something intelligent anymore. This is very unintelligent. It's very stupefying. It's very dumb. It's very no mind, very zen in its sort of not knowing quality, right? Like you're literally just saying stupid stuff now. Or, well, are you? Because storytelling axiom can make something that's stupid intelligent. So, but you kind of see where I'm going with this, hopefully. It's almost like, I guess like a Zen koan. It's like a riddle, but ironically, I don't mean for it to be a riddle. I am speaking literally right now as I talk about the storytelling axiom. It's just that it's so nonsensical that even if I speak about it plainly and literally in a very straightforward manner, it still comes out as a sort of Zen riddle or koan, because it is so contradictory and so paradoxical to say that, this skin looks green to you even though it doesn't, or to say that you are experiencing a pig's life even though you're actually experiencing a human's life, or to say that the self is not a self even if it is a self, right? Like, we can again just say anything. So that's the case with, yourself as a human. That's the case with even yourself itself, right? We can say it's a real self. We can say it's not a self. even if it is a real self, right? We can say yellow is green, even if it's not green, right? It's just we can't use any of this practically. It's like I said at the end of the last video. None of this is practical to philosophy. It's definitely not practical to science. I mean, there's lots of things, even in philosophy, that aren't practical to science. So if none of this is even practical to philosophy, is nowhere remotely close to being practical to science, because none of this is anything that you could use in your everyday life. Like, think about it, you wouldn't even survive. It would mean utter death for you. It would mean the extinction of the human species if we tried to apply any of this craziness to our everyday lives. Because how could you, for example, go to the fridge and even get a drink of water if you're like, well, maybe this water is also the color green and maybe it'll suffocate me even though it also hydrates me, right? Like maybe water is lava even though it's not lava, or maybe it's a tree even though it's just a bottle of water. Like, if you can say anything of the bottle of water, then it's like, how are you just going to sit there and get a drink of water, right? You kind of just have to block all this out. Although, ironically, on that note, again, remember, if we have this absolute anythingness, that means we can also just isolate one exclusive statement, and that's the only statement that's true, right? We can have standalone truths such that, yeah, we could say the fact that the water is going to hydrate you is like an exclusive standalone truth. Therefore, just go ahead, get a drink of water, you'll be fine, right? We could say that, right? Like, it's just a standalone truth that this skin does not look green to you. Storytelling axiom, of course, allows for standalone truths. It's just that it allows for the other stuff to be true. Despite that, right? Again, it's contradictory. You can have things being true simultaneously and yet have one statement be true on its own unsimultaneously from the others, right? So even if it is true to say that this skin looks green to you, the fact that it looks tan to you, that's still just a standalone truth. You don't need to regard the statement about it being green, right? You can just look at the exclusive tanness of it on its own. So same thing with getting a drink of water, right? Even if it is true to say that the water is poison, we can still regard the fact that it'll hydrate you as just a 100% standalone truth. You don't need to regard all the other things about it being poison or being a dolphin or being lava or all that crazy stuff, right? So it's like, ironically, this utter insanity that we get with this absolute anythingness and things like the storytelling axiom, ironically, they all kind of come full circle on themselves, such that we come back around to square one and we're back around to just having these single, exclusive, standalone truths. It is only true to say that the skin is apricot or tan. It's only true to say that the water will hydrate you, and all the other statements you don't need to regard as true. It's just those single statements on their own. Those are the only truths. So we're back around to square one in that sense. So with that said, even though all of this is very stupefying rather than intellectual, we are still able to pursue intellectual endeavors despite all this paradoxical craziness, because again, we can just regard certain truths as standalone truths, right? Not just regard them as such, but they'll literally be standalone truths given the storytelling axiom and absolute anythingness and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where in the next video I'll actually talk about a more intellectual, slightly practical topic. It'll be completely different than all this wacky craziness. But another note on this real quick is that due to the just, I don't know, boundless nature of this anythingness that I'm talking about and all the craziness that you see with the storytelling axiom, this is one of the reasons that I like to use terms like anythingness or absolute infinity in order to describe how reality looks in my experience, right? Because these are what I call explosive terms, as I've mentioned before. Like if anythingness is real, then that means that anything is real. But if anything is real, that means that not anything is real, right? Like if it's true to say that anything is true, then it's also true to say that it's not true that anything is true. And yet you could go further than that. It's true to say that it's both true and not true, right? So it's like now we have both anythingness and not anythingness. But then we could go further, right? Because if we have anything, we can just keep going. If anything is true, then neither anything nor not anything is true. So see, it kind of admits of itself that as a descriptor, it falls short of fully describing things, right? Like anythingness admits that we could also have things that are not anythingness, or neither anythingness nor not anythingness, or something else beyond all those options, or yet another option beyond those further ones, right? It kind of just explodes off and keeps going and leaves you speechless, right? It kind of just trails off like an echo and vanishes, leaving you speechless in silence. That's kind of how it works, right? So the term anythingness is good at implying that it falls short. It's good at kind of trailing you off into that speechlessness. Also the term absolute infinity, that's another one I like to use for the very same reason. It kind of trails off in that same way, right? Because if reality is absolutely infinite, that means it's absolutely boundless. But if it's absolutely boundless, then it's not even bounded to boundlessness itself, right? So it could be something else besides boundless. It could be finite instead of infinite, or it could be beyond infinite instead of infinite, or it could be something in between the two, or something even further beyond whatever is beyond infinity in the first place, right? Like it could just be any of those things, because it's literal anythingness and it's absolutely infinite, it's absolutely boundless. So it's unbounded even from boundlessness itself, right? So again, absolute infinity, like anythingness, it's this explosive term that just explodes off. Again, it's like an echo. It just goes off forever, vanishes into silence, leaves you speechless. And that's where we sort of get like a very sort of Zen quality of ineffability in talking about what reality would be like if it were really this way. So that's why it's very stupefying. Because again, you can't use it for anything, it just leaves you in speechlessness. But even though you can't use any of this itself as an intellectual pursuit, again, you still can pursue intellectual endeavors because those are not incompatible with anything that's been said here, right? Like if anything is true, then it could simply be true that we are just in a finite empirical universe and science is the best, most correct method for gaining knowledge and truth, right? Like all of that could be a standalone truth, right? If anything is true, then that could be the truth. So, there's nothing incompatible about being into heavy research and science and being very empirical with your approach to truth or knowledge. With that said, my next video will dig into that further, right? It will be a more intellectual video. I will be discussing more scientific subjects, more specifically how they relate to mysticism and a lot of things that mystics get wrong about science. So you may say, well, Ethan, they may get it wrong, but Storytelling Axiom says they also get it right. Okay, well, yeah, sure. But again, remember, Storytelling Axiom also allows us to make standalone truths, such that my skin is just apricot, and therefore it allows us to make the standalone statement that there's simply things that people get wrong about science and philosophy. And I see a lot of those types of problems in spiritual circles and mystical circles, so I will be addressing those in the next video. It's going to be a video with a vibe that is polar opposite to what this one was like, and yet again it'll still be compatible because anythingness includes its own polar opposite. So I am not limited to avoiding the polar opposite. I can include it in my own content. So hopefully you'll enjoy that video, and hopefully you enjoyed this one. It was probably a little wacky, and I don't know, maybe you don't know how to think anymore. Hopefully I didn't make you dumber. Maybe I shaved off 30 IQ points with this one. I don't know. But again, you can take this all as just sort of metaphysical or mystical entertainment if you like. Let me know if you have any questions on anything that I discussed here or in the first part of this video. And until next time, you all create a nice day, or don't create a nice day. I guess with the storytelling axiom, it doesn't matter. Just do whatever you like.